How you been doing?
Doing really good.
You've been opening and headlining some big shows?
No, I've actually been doing a lot of production work at home, and I'm working with Chris Caffery. We're supposed to be doing some shows this spring and summer, but we had a South American tour that fell through with John Oliva. So things have been pretty slow performance-wise, but I've been doing a lot of work as a producer in my home studio, and I'm building that business up.
So how's Chris's new album coming out?
It's great. One song for it, and I'm waiting to get the hard copy of the whole thing. I've heard the stuff online, but I'm still waiting to get the actual CD.
Right on. So you participated, if I'm correct, in the Vinnie Vincent project, Kiss My Yank?
Yes.
What did you actually do in this?
For that, I talked to the producer for that album, and he said that one of his bands dropped out and he needed someone to cut a song. And what they were doing was, the song was a parody of Unholy. And the guy that did this thing is CC Banana, and he knew Ted Poley from Danger Danger. And there's a story that goes behind it, that when Ted went out on tour with Kiss, he passed Paul Stanley in the hallway, and he was really shy about meeting Paul. And the first time he saw him up close, and he didn't know what to say, so he kind of put his head down, and as Paul Stanley passed him in the hallway, Paul sang out to him. He said, "Ted Poley!" So that was like a really cool story for Ted, because Ted was a really big fan of Kiss, and it was very exciting to be on the road with him. And I really appreciated that story, because I got to tour with Kiss in 2004. And although I didn't have that same type of experience, I got to talk to Paul Stanley a couple times, and Gene Simmons, and all the guys in Kiss were really approachable and fun backstage. So I know what that felt like, to have that really cool connection with someone you grew up idolizing. So for the Ted Poley song, I did everything but the drums. I played the guitars, the bass, and the vocals were done by CC Banana, and the drums were done by Dennis LaFling from Bumblefoot's band, the guitar player from Guns N' Roses. So his drummer did the drums for me, and he mastered it as well. And I called Chris Caffery in to do the guitar solo on it.
Oh, really?
And then after that, he asked me if I wanted to do another song. And since I'd already done Unholy, I decided to do a death metal version of that song. So there's one song's a parody, and it's funny, and it's light, and then the other one is just really nasty and dark, and it was a lot of fun to do.
Now, going back to that project, does anyone know if Vinnie Vincent ever got a copy of this and heard these songs?
It is really doubtful that he got a copy of this. No one seems to know where he is. He really disappeared, and no one knows how to get in touch with him. It's kind of sad. You'd wish that if you did a project like this in tribute, that he'd at least be able to have the pleasure of knowing that someone put an album around together to pay tribute to him. But I don't know where he is, and no one knows if he got a copy or not.
Right. You a fan of Vinnie Vincent?
I'm not necessarily a fan. I certainly respect the work he did with Kiss and as a songwriter. The Invasion for me was just a little bit outside of my taste musically, but I respect him. I think he's a talented writer and a really great player. But he did give the world Slaughter, so that's something he should be punished for.
I think they did very good, sales-wise.
I mean, and to Slaughter's credit, I saw Mark Slaughter live with one of those Vince Neil things, one of the tours he did with the Voices of Rock.
Right.
And Mark Slaughter is actually a tremendous vocalist, but I just never cared for that style of songwriting.
And you know that Dana Strum produced our great Randy Rhoads to Discover.
Yes. Yeah, I know Dana Strum had a great history, and I think, didn't he get Jakey Lee in?
Yeah, he did Jakey Lee too, a try for Ozzy.
Yeah, he was responsible for getting a few of Ozzy's guitar players in there, so that was pretty...
That's very interesting, how he got all those connections. Because it's supposed that Dana Strum is like one of the original Ozzy Osbourne bassists that he actually played. But this is before recordings and all this stuff.
Right.
You toured with Kiss, Poison.
Yep.
How do you like Poison?
Poison were unbelievably cool. And the first day we walked out on stage, I was playing with ZO2. I played keyboards on one of their songs, and I was their tech. The first day we were setting up, Bret Michaels came out on stage and shook everybody's hand, And he said, "Hi, my name's Brett. If you guys need anything at all, if you need gear, if you need any help with anything, just ask Big John here." And he pointed out, if you've ever watched Rock of Love, the big roadie, Big John, who's his manager and bodyguard and everything. It's like he's like anything you need. And we just looked at each other like, that's pretty damn cool.
Yeah.
Here's the guy, like, lead singer from Poison coming out to an absolutely unknown band, the opening band on this spot. Anything you need, come to me. And so you kind of walk into it with a certain misconception of Poison. Oh, it's a hair band, it's blah, 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 this and that. And they turned out to be the nicest guys, the funniest guys. CeCe DeVille is hysterical. He's got a nonstop personality. He's always on. Bobby Dahl was really sweet. He had his kid on the road with him, and it was a really good vibe. And their technicians were amazing. Everybody that worked for Poison were incredible. Can't say enough good things about Poison.
And didn't you play with Doro Pesh?
We opened for Doro, and Chris played guitar with her on tour in 2005. It was the summer before last.
So Chris Caffery played with Doro Pesh.
He played guitar for her while Joe was taking a break from the band. He
Right.
was off the tour for a little bit, and Chris played with her, and also we opened for her on the summer tour. And then I got to mix her. I was her sound engineer for that tour, and it was really fun.
And what's the story with Metal Church?
Metal Church, the same thing. We toured with them in 2005. We did a European tour, and I got to do sound for them on that tour. So usually when I tour with Chris, I try to work my way in. We're opening for somebody. I try to be the sound man for the headliner because normally they can't afford a separate engineer.
Right.
That gives me something constructive to do after I play with it's nice to have something to do instead of just hanging out. I like to keep myself busy.
So what type of guitars you play?
I am currently endorsed by BC Rich, and I'm playing their Mockingbirds. I'm not sure the model number. I think it's the most current Mockingbird they have.
Okay.
And for Chris's stuff, it's perfect. I love the Jackson guitars, but I could never get any support from them as an endorsee. And the Brian Moore guitarists I like a lot as well. Had the best support, and they've been incredible in terms of taking care of me. If I'm on the road, I'll call them up a month before I leave, and I'll give them a laundry list of things I need for my tech bag. Because I'm my own guitar technician, I need to have switches and pots and tuning gears, things for pieces of your guitar.
Right.
You need a bag of tricks to fix things. And BC Rich has been really supportive. I used to have a Beast and a Zombie, and the NJ series stuff, I just wasn't crazy about the way they played. They looked fantastic, but when I played the Mockingbirds at the NAMM in 2005, I fell in love with these models. They play like Les Pauls. They got a certain thickness to them. I like it a lot.
So going to your effects units, what do you use mostly live?
For outboard effects, it depends on the type of tour. Like if we're kind of low budget tour and we're not taking our own amps and we play through like house amps, I usually end up with some kind of Marshall or Mesa Boogie on stage, like the back lines. So for that stuff, I have to go in with some kind of volume boost, and I like the Boss, the yellow overdrives, because that's a warm boost with a little bit of distortion. And then I usually use a Rocktron Hush for noise, some kind of Boss chorus like the CE3, and some kind of delay. But what I prefer is the Rocktron Chameleon, which I've had since it's been at least 15 years, and I've yet to have anything that has the variety that the Chameleon has. I absolutely love it. It's just not the best, most organic sounding. It's very processed and 80s sounding. It's not like I have a Marshall Super Trem 100 at home that sounds like a Marshall and it sounds amazing. The Chameleon sounds really slick and polished. So it's not the best amp for every situation, but I really love the Chameleons.
When you take a band on tour and you're the sound man, do you mic the bass and DI it also?
It depends on the size of the room and how loud the bass player plays. I definitely like to have the option of both because there's nothing like the sound of, a bass amplifier distorts a certain way and has a certain warmth to it. So I prefer to do it on a bigger stage. But the problem in smaller clubs is a lot of bass players they don't turn down. So I rarely put the bass in the mix unless the band is really responsible and do what they're supposed to do.
So you don't even DI it at that case?
I will DI it, but
Right.
I end up not being able to put it in the mix a lot of times.
Okay.
It just depends on the size of the room and how loud the bass player's playing on stage.
And most bass players play very loud.
Very loud. Yeah, but on bigger stages, it doesn't affect you as much because you can sneak in both sounds and really get a nice, good bass sound.
See bass players processing in stereo often, or is that a little bit rarer? Never.
Yeah, I've never. Usually the bass players I've worked with are very simple and they plug directly into their amp and that's it.
Right.
Very rarely do I even see a bass player using an outboard compressor, which I play bass too, and when I play out with a bass, I usually take a DBX. I have a 266 XL that I'll put in before I get to the amp, and I prefer a heavily compressed bass sound.
Mm-hmm.
But stereo bass, never.
No.
I've never seen it.
I've heard about it a few times. In the Ozzy Osbourne days, they worked like that.
Well, on a concert stage, maybe there's more room for that. But I've only mixed in big clubs. Like I've probably mixed for the most amount of people is 3,000, maybe 6,000 in an outdoor stage. So even in those situations, you don't have a lot of room to play around with processing. You kind of, but that's of course if you're able to run in stereo. Most of the systems I've worked on are strictly mono because there's just there's not enough money to put into a small club. And at least that's the way it used to be about 10 years ago when I was doing a lot of club sound.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't run into too many stereo rigs in the smaller places.
Like to this day, do you guys play in stereo at all on stage, or is it
On stage? No. Like Chris is
mostly mono?
Mostly mono. If he can afford to bring out an extra cabinet, he'll put a cabinet on my side of the stage, and that's primarily just to give him a little bit more fullness at center stage position. But it's not necessarily separate left, right. Like his processing's all in mono. Yeah, I think even with TSL, when he goes on the road with TSL, it's a straight ahead,
Really?
simple sound.
Okay. Depends on what the people want to hear, I guess. Mono, more power. Stereo, less power. So how long have you been into this big scene of music?
I wouldn't say I'm in the big scene. I still feel very. I'm very happy to be where I'm at, and I've gotten to do some very good things.
Right.
But yeah, I'm a side man. I work for Chris, and we get to tour occasionally, but I don't really get to. I don't make a living from playing music. I'm a sound man by trade, and I do a lot of corporate events, and I mix and produce, like you do, like local bands from out of my home studio, and I love doing that. But I'm not really in the big scene. I'm a very little pond.
And what type of equipment do you use in your home studio, like for mixer and all that stuff and recording deck?
I've got the Digio 03, a Neumann TLM 103 into a Eureka Pre, and everything else is in the box. It's within Pro Tools and Logic, Digital Performer. It's all plugins. I don't have a whole lot of outboard gear.
So when you record a band, do you mostly do like 24 tracks, or do you even need that many?
No, probably. It depends on the band. The last thing I produced was something from Fischl's Beast, which is a band from the 80s that was on Metal Blade, and they fractured into two separate bands. It used to be Sentinel Beast, and I got called in to do the final tracking for the guitars and the vocal tracking, and then the mix. So by the time I got to this band, they had already done. The guitar player had 6 microphones on each track that he played. So every part he played, there were 6 separate elements that I had to mix.
Really?
So there were 24 tracks of just guitar, and then the drums, the bass, and then 5 to 10 tracks of vocals. So I think I got up to 48 tracks on this last project, and it wasn't something I would have done from the beginning that way. It was very complicated.
Well, it sounds it.
Involved.
That is a lot of tracks.
I wasn't happy, but he played through a JCM 900 and an older Marshall, like a JTM 45. So the blend of those two sounds were very important to him.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 mics per amplifier plus a room mic plus some other mic, and it adds up quick.
And this is all in one guitar take with six tracks.
Well, there were a couple edits that I did, mostly with punching in. So once the part was completed and I did the crossfades and everything was clean, that chunk of 6 tracks for that part was easy to move around and line up and place it properly. But he had a lot of harmony parts. He had a lot of call and response. He would play a part and then answer it. A lot of his leads he would do as if he were 2 different players, and one lead would answer the other lead, so they would overlap. The last note would be the first note on the next lead. So there was a lot of that insanity. Wow.
So I thought Michael Jackson was the only one that used like 48 tracks just for his voice.
I worked with J.T. Taylor from Kool and the Gang.
Okay.
And I did a track. I did Ladies Night with him. He did a bed for some rap artist, and he did just 24 tracks of his voice. First take, every time, perfect.
Really?
And he doubled himself. He would do that whole chorus from that song. And he was just like, okay, next track. And he just went boom, boom, boom. And within an hour or two, he'd filled up 24 tracks.
Of one song.
And, it was remember Ladies Night, the big hit?
Yeah. And there's 24 vocal tracks?
Just 24 tracks of vocals. And then he sent it off to this rap artist, and they did a rap over his vocal lines. And it was just, I've never seen anyone work faster or more consistently.
That's an interesting thought, 24 tracks of vocals.
Yeah, just vocals. Yeah, all the bands I've recorded with have been local and demo projects. The most famous thing I did was I worked with John Macaluso on his solo album. John played with Yngwie Malmsteen, and he toured with James LaBrie and George Lynch. He founded ARC. He's a very well-respected musician, so I got to track his album, a lot of his drum parts. So that's probably the biggest thing. And then on Chris's album, Pins and Needles, I did all the edits. I did all the cleanup work, the tedious stuff, but I didn't get to mix that one.
And how do you clean it? Is it like mastering you're talking about here?
No, when you do track cleanup, let's say you take a vocal line, you want to go into that track and make sure that everything in between the singing is erased.
Okay.
On guitar tracks, you tighten up a guitar track. If you have 4 or 5 tracks that are doubling apart, you make sure on every beat that it starts and ends exactly on the beat. So you'll do a fade at the end, so everything ends exactly and goes to silence. I mean, depending on the song, it's like if you want it to be really dry and punchy, you'll go in there with a knife and just cut things and make sure everything is super tight. You make sure that the bass is lined up with the kick drum. Make sure every time the kick drum hits in the bass that they're completely lined up and that there's no noise in between notes. It's really tedious work, but it's really enjoyable. I like to do it a lot.
Mm-hmm. Do you master it all also?
I don't. I really don't have the gear to do mastering. Mastering is an art, and it takes thousands and thousands of dollars of really good equipment to properly master something.
Did you ever hear of Isotope yet?
Yes, I'm not crazy about the isotope stuff.
You don't like that?
I have not been able to get a good sound out of it. I might just be not using it correctly, but I have the isotope stuff that came with Pro Tools.
Okay.
And just haven't found the right settings for me. Just maybe it's because I'm using the demo versions and I can't change parameter. For the summer, we don't have any concrete plans. We're supposed to start rehearsing soon with Chris, and I don't have any dates yet. But he wants to do some work this summer. And then outside of that, I'm working on my own. I've got 4 or 5 different projects out of my studio that I'm working on right now. Different styles of music. I'm doing some guitar parts and some things, parts. I'm playing a lot. Just nothing really big. Just keeping my head above water kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Building my studio.
When do you think Chris Caffery is gonna make Savatage go back and bring you in it?
Not a chance.
Oh no.
Not a chance in the world. Now, if Savatage gets back together, Paul O'Neill, who is the producer, is very particular, and he loves Al Pitrelli. Al Pitrelli has been all the TSO albums, and he fits Paul O'Neill's style of production perfectly. So there's no way I would ever be in line to play with Savatage.
Wow. Okay. So,
Yeah, it's.
well, I don't
It would
think
be nice, but
didn't
you
Jack
never-
Frost play in there?
yeah, Jack did a really good job in the Poets and Madmen's tour. But yeah, I think Jack was replaced by Al. Al came back, and Jack was moved out again.
So, Paul, what else do you have to add to this interview?
I want to mention that my production company is called Stentor Productions, and my website is stentorproductions.com. I did the Officials Beast production through that company, and I'm looking for new bands. Been doing everything from singer-songwriters to heavy metal. I provide tracks from professional musicians like Chris Caffery and John Macaluso. I've got a whole bunch of people that I can hook bands and producers and songwriters up with.
Right.
And I'm also connected with about 5 or 6 great studios in New York City and Brooklyn to fit any budget. Guys that want to come in and do a cheap demo, or people want to do a full-blown, major label album. We have connections to some of the best studios in the city and probably in the country. So I just want to mention that as well.
How good can you make an album?
It depends on the songwriting. It depends on the players.
Yeah.
Recording is it's important, but I interviewed Neil Kernan a couple years ago, who produced Nevermore and some really brilliant albums. And I said, Neil, how do you get a really good guitar sound? He said, well, the first thing you start with a really good guitar player.
Right.
And you make sure he has a really good guitar and a really good amplifier. Then you get a really good microphone, and it's like, and he went down the list of the signal chain. Like, it's obvious, and it's kind of dumb if you don't think that way, but it's like, you can't really get a good sound or a good mix if you don't have, right from the fingertips of a really good player on down the line, that signal chain. It has to be quality right from the start all the way through. So, you could have the best recording equipment in the world, but if you're recording a shitty song, it's still going to be a shitty song.
Right. You use like SM57s for your micings, mostly for guitars and stuff, or better?
It depends on the sound of that guitar, how loud it is, what the style of music is. 57s work great, and I love using them, but usually you have to blend a 57 with a warmer sounding mic. Anything from, the Sennheiser stuff, the RE20s, a larger diaphragm, a warmer mic off the rim somewhere or in the room. The 57 is, no one really listens to a speaker with an ear right up against it, and that's what a 57 does for you. It gives you that speaker right in your ear.
Right.
So that's great for articulation, it's great for note definition, but it's not the only mic I use when I'm recording an amp. It needs to be something else for fullness,
Did you ever try out older 57s compared to what you get today? 57s?
No, I haven't did an A/B comparison on an older 57 to a newer one. It's whatever the studio has. It's a 57 and I put it up. I've never really compared.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
All right, Jason. Thank you so much for the interview, and we'll talk to you soon.